Hi everyone, Doug Leslie here with the Christian Ministry Alliance with another Alliance Learning webinar on crafting a memorable elevator pitch. As you can see, if you normally join us, this is a little bit different as we pre-recorded our webinar earlier today due to some scheduling conflicts. And so this is my introduction here today on November 12th, 2020 with Matt Carroll from Big Big Story. A couple items about who we are first. The Alliance is a national alliance of local churches and ministry parachurches. And so for those of you who don't know who we are an organization that was started to come alongside and help clear the clutter for ministry leaders so they can get on with their mission. And that takes a lot of different roles from a lot of different people, but we are here just to come alongside. We do that by providing credible, practical, and affordable services and resources, as long as consulting for ministries and churches. And so we just come alongside and we hear who you are and what you want, what your requirements are, and then we try to help you as best as possible. If we can't help you, we will direct you to someone who can. We understand that our niche are smaller organizations, but we are here to help, and that's kind of what we do from the Alliance level. Alliance Learning, then, is one of our program offerings we offer through the Alliance for you all online to watch. Today's webinar, just be understanding, it's going to be around 60 minutes. I think we ended up a few minutes early today, which sometimes happens because we pre-recorded and there were no questions to deal with. We offer it as more of a classroom environment than a true webinar, and normally we'll have people interacting and asking questions kind of throughout the process. And you'll notice today it's more of a conversation between Matt Carroll and I as we discuss items back and forth. But that's type of how we do our webinars in general as well. And then of course we inquire if you are with us to ask plenty of questions. Okay, so our presenter. Matt Carroll is from Big Big Story out in Richmond, Virginia. He's a 20-year veteran of working with churches and faith-based nonprofits, as well as small businesses and other things. He is a communicator extraordinaire. He's a former pastor and has been involved in church plants and established churches throughout the years. And most of all, while we have him here today, is he a certified story brand guide. And he is our expert today as we discuss together how to fashion and craft a memorable elevator pitch. Let's get on with Matt Carroll. All right, Matt, thanks so much for being with us today as we get involved with this idea of how to create a memorable elevator pitch. I remember when we were working together, and for those watching this, Matt was the consultant that we used when we were developing one for the Alliance, because we found it was so crazy trying to wrap our heads around how to explain what we did so the general public could understand, let alone donors and everybody else that we were working with. And so we are thrilled that you've agreed to be with us today and help people through this and ministries through this, possibly churches, depending on who's watching. But we're great. It's great to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I mean, this is,
You're
I
welcome.
think, yeah, I think a lot of people, they don't realize the impact that a elevator pitch might have on their ministry or their nonprofit, because it kind of feels like, you're at a networking event, you're trying to sell something when you think of elevator pitch, but essentially every single person that we run into is an opportunity to be able to get them behind the vision of our ministry and the thing that we do. And so it's important to know what you're going to say if someone asks that big question. So what is it that you do? Because if you don't have a good answer, then you're going to miss out on some opportunity.
Yeah.
Uh,
So let me ask you this question. Have you
yeah.
run across people that you've asked the question, because you're in a particular frame of mind all the time because of what you do. And I think we should give it an opportunity for you to kind of introduce yourself and give yourself a background
Yeah,
before we
for
get
sure.
into this. But because of your position and because of what you do you have a different filter that when you ask people, so tell me what you do. Do you have a different filter that you're always running through when people answer that question? Do you gauge
Well,
them?
Sometimes, but I think more times than not, my filter is I don't want anyone to feel like if they're, especially if they're my friend or something like that, that
Right.
I'm trying to leverage my business, with them or things like that. So I am sometimes choosy on how I talk about myself, but then um, I do smile inside my heart and be like, man, they really need some marketing or they need some help. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
But
that's the
yeah,
question. You have a ranking system in your head that you got to go through.
well, you can always tell, like, so if you're in a networking event and there's a room full of people, there's the one person that you wish you could communicate as well as they communicate. You're like, why is it that what they said seemed to resonate with everyone, but then every single other person is just painful? You're just like, oh, they have no idea what they're saying, and you're checking out, your brain is going somewhere else because, their what their pitch is really bad.
Yeah, because
So,
oftentimes, like that would be us. That would have been. I'll be honest, Matt. That would have been us. I We struggled because we had that kind of weird. I need to say something, but I'm not sure what to say to get the point across what we really do. And
yeah.
that was our struggle, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get started, give us a little bit of self-introduction. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Why do you
Yeah.
do what you do? That kind of
Yeah,
thing.
for sure. Well, so what makes me kind of unique in the marketing space, especially with what you do, Doug, is the fact that I worked in the church world for about 20 years. And so I was a middle school pastor for around 15 years, which is crazy for middle school pastors because
That's
that's,
crazy long
yeah,
for a middle school. That's a lot
yeah,
of booger jokes, man.
there is, yeah. And now that my oldest is becoming a middle schooler, there's a lot of flashbacks there. Um, so I did that for about 15 years. I eventually became a family pastor. I actually was part of a church plant for a couple years. But always, in that, I was playing more of a communications director there, and always, everything that I did had something to do with communication. And I like to joke that, like, if you can communicate to middle schoolers, you would probably be a good marketer because you have to
Yeah.
keep someone's attention span. You have to
Right.
speak in simple terms, keep their attention, and then you would be a good marketer. And so while I was part of the church plant that I was in, I came across, well, a lot of people in your circle may know of Donald Miller. And Donald
Right.
Miller, he wrote a bunch of memoirs and books and things like that. But most recently, he started a business called Story Brand. And so you can find his podcast. He is building a story brand, which is becoming business made simple. But anyways, around that time, I fell in love with his content on communicating in simple terms. And so I became one of their certified story brand guides. And so that's kind of my background, is like in the nonprofit church world. But then for the past 4 years, I've been running my own business and working with people like you and small businesses and things like that to clarify their message.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the quick background.
No, that's
So
great because I think that's helpful because when people think about, because one of the disconnects that I find talking with churches and other ministries, Matt, is that there's a disconnect between how a ministry person communicates and how a general public or business person communicates.
for
And the
sure.
words that are used they assume that everybody knows, right? And they have no idea. When I talk to even ministry leaders and I talk about donor advised funds, they don't have any idea about fundraising with that I'm talking about, right? So we have to shift terminology. And I think what you do really well is allowed to clarify using words that everybody gets and the aha lights pop on. And that's kind of important.
Yeah, and I think probably the best place to start would be kind of why do we want to think about
Yeah,
this?
go for
And so I think to your point, Doug, words make a first and a lasting impression. So there's a lot of studies behind, first impression, like when you get on someone's website, or even just like when you first meet someone, the first thing that comes out of their mouth, you like people just make snap judgments, and they make, they have first impressions. But unfortunately, that first impression becomes the lasting impression because you place a filter on someone, you place a filter on who you think they are based off the first thing that they say, and it's hard to overcome that if you don't have the right thing to say. And so I think it's so important for the church world, especially, if we're gospel minded, or you're trying to reach people. People have a lot of opinions about churches, right?
Right.
And
Do.
and so what we say will make a first and lasting impression on the possibility of whether or not they might show up, or whether or not they may get behind you and be a part of your ministry, or give money to your cause or something like that. So I think it's so important because it is, what you say is going to make the first and then a long-term lasting impression.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The next thing, and I mean, words create possibilities. If you look at how the Bible started, right? At the beginning of time, uh, God spoke, the world into existence. So words create possibilities, and so like probably when you started Christian Ministry Alliance, like it was a dream, and then you spoke it to someone,
Yeah,
right?
that's
And
right.
so it's like, our words are the things that create opportunity and possibility. And so it's so important. It's like, well, what are you going to say that's going to have someone respond to what you're about? So, and then the last one, I mean, working with church people, that there's a lot of closed doors to people being open to the gospel, right? And so maybe how you reframe something, how you say something will be an open door to someone trying out church for the first time or something like
Right.
that. So for me, I was part of a church plant. And do you work with a lot of church planners?
Yeah, more and more they're beginning to call simply because they're starting off, and we provide those resources that help them get going well. So,
Yeah. So that's just a weird thing for people who aren't part of the church to be like, wait, so you moved to our town? You moved to our city to start a church? Are you
that's
like, are you a cult? Are you like, why are you here? What are you doing? And so it's just a weird thing. And so we had to really work on how we are communicating, why we are there for people, so the conversation didn't immediately shut down. And so some of the examples we're going to look at in in this presentation will kind of help you see like some of the things that we tried. But if we didn't have that down, like if we didn't know what we were going to say, then people would be like, what, you're weird, I'm not going to talk to you. And so we had to
right.
really get our pitch down so that doors would be open in the future for people to actually like want to hang out with us. Yeah, so it's so
It's
important.
kind of important when you're planning a church, right?
Yeah, but then also like even if you're an established church, like people are kind of like, I don't know, do I want to go back to church? Do I want to check it out? So it's just real important that we can open doors with the words that we say. So yeah, let's dive in. Are you ready?
Let's go, man. Let's do it.
All right. So elements of an effective elevator pitch. So you're hanging out at a barbecue in your neighborhood, and someone's like, hey, so tell me what you do. And so here's the three parts of an effective elevator pitch: is problem, solution, outcome. And so I'll just talk through all three of these. So the problem, you want to lead with the problem. You want to start off by stating the problem or pain point your audience faces. And so what so often happens is like when we're hanging out with people and they ask that question, they're like, tell me what you do. We answer with our job title, right? Well, I do marketing,
Right.
or I run a nonprofit for small churches. That might be what you do, right? Or I'm a plumber. But the thing is, like, whenever we lead with our job title, we allow the person to define what they think that is. So I say I'm a marketer. Well, they may have all kinds of ideas on what a marketer is. And so they'll just say, okay, marketer, and then they move on to the next thing. But the human brain really cares about whether or not you can solve their problems or not. And so by leading with a problem, what we're doing is we're creating a hook for them to pay attention. And so starting with a problem, you may say, well, you know how a lot of people struggle finding a church they really connect with? Well, you just opened up a story loop for them to pay attention. They're like, oh yeah, I have a hard time finding churches, or I've been to 100 churches and it's really difficult to find one I connect with. So if you
Right.
start with a problem, suddenly there's a hook and they're like, oh, so after a problem, we want to provide a solution. So talk about the solution to the problem you stated. So you're like, you know how a lot of people struggle finding a church to connect with? Well, our church does blah 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 blah. So what happens is because you started with the problem, then people are more open to listen to the solution. And then you end with the outcome. Clearly explain how your audience will feel after you solve their problem. And so you want to paint a picture of success.
Yeah.
Now, what this is a really, really simplified version of a story structure. So like if you go and watch a movie, Doug, you're going to start, every movie starts with a big problem. Like there's a main character who is trying to overcome something.
Right.
If there is no problem, then there's no story. There's no reason to watch. It's just a guy hanging out, right?
That's right.
So it's like we need a problem. And so after that, in the movie, the hero finds some sort of solution to their problem, and then they implement the solution, and then there's an outcome, and the movie ends. So this is a really simple story structure. And so that's essentially what we're doing is in like 15 seconds, we're presenting a really short story, a little nugget out there that's like, hey, there's something interesting going on. There's a problem that you might be facing that I have a solution to, and then there's success for you. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And one of the things I really like about this is now it makes sense to me now because I've been, I sat
Yeah,
with you for all those weeks walking through that.
yeah,
But the I love the outcome idea when it talks about explaining how your audience will feel after you solve their problem because you're tapping into something much more than just an analytical, oh, I see how that works,
right.
right? Because you're given buy-in. And
Mm-hmm.
so I like how you positioning, and this is really important for everybody who's this is your first time. These are the things that, at least for us, if you've never been through this process, it's the light bulbs that now I can sit back and I can gauge having a conversation with somebody. Did that light bulb go on or did it not? And I can trace it back to, did I address how they're going to feel after I solve their problem?
Hmm. Yeah.
Or did I slip back into my old weird, not really saying anything, trying to fumble around, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's saying that you have an end goal in mind for them, that
yeah,
it's not just show up, but we actually want your life to be fundamentally different and changed and better.
yeah,
So, yeah. So,
yeah, that's really important.
I
So,
I think what would be helpful is us walking through some examples because right now this is like, well, great, but how does that actually
right,
work? So,
it's theoretical, and people don't quite know how to do this stuff yet. So, yeah,
yeah, so I
let's do
figured
that.
we'd look at my business and your business, and then we would look at some church examples and nonprofit examples.
That perfect, perfect.
So we'll just start with me. So this is, my business is big story. So the problem that we're really helping people overcome is too many businesses are living with a crappy website that isn't making them money. So me and my business partner, we came
I
up
want
with
you to,
this.
I want you to be honest. Don't beat around the bush. Just be direct with me,
Yeah,
please.
yeah. Well, we came up with this because we wanted to kind of be funny, also kind of tongue in cheek. It's like, oh, crappy. But the solution are content and design. Now that part right there it's simple. Like we create content and design. Okay.
Yeah,
So it doesn't have to be long, really short, but the outcome. So if you use our content design, it will focus your message, grab your customers' attention, and spark growth in your business. So we kind of have three outcomes there. I like three kind of has a rhythm to it, but you don't always have to have three.
sure.
Um, but so just simply put, like if someone, like I'm hanging out at a barbecue or at the swimming pool this summer and someone's like, Um, so Matt, tell me what you do. I may just lead with the problem. I may say, man, you know how like a lot of small businesses have crappy websites? And I may
Yeah,
pause for a second. And like, yeah, they're terrible. I was like, well, what we
like
do,
mine.
what I do is I create great content and design so that they can grab customers' attention, spark growth in their business, and focus their message or something like that. So I try and keep it kind of informal, like conversational. But this right here, I have at the footer of my website, that it's like, hey, this is kind of the thing that frames everything I do is like, we're about helping focus your message on your website. So that's an example for me. So let's go to you, Doug.
Yeah, yeah,
And
man.
this is what we worked on about a year ago.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep.
the problem we identified with you is many small church pastors and nonprofit leaders are overwhelmed by running the business side of their organization.
Now, do you know who
Now,
really gets this?
who?
Non-ministry leaders.
Hmm.
When I talk to business people or potential donors, but more business oriented people who are in churches, this
Mhm.
goes, oh, completely. They don't,
Yeah.
it's just not who they are. And we always wonder, is it being run well? So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
church leaders sometimes don't get it in the smaller church because they don't understand the difference.
Mm. Okay.
That makes
Yeah.
sense? But
Hmm.
but if once you take a step back, and typically for a church, they I have to kind of tweak how I approach it with the problem, because they feel personally attacked.
Right. Yeah. Well, you
Does it?
may have, yeah, I could see you using this, but personalizing it, personalizing it for the
Yeah,
person you're talking to and be like,
yeah,
hey, man, tell me about, the business side of things. How are you handling that?
that's right.
And
Uh,
then, diving
but
into
yes,
your other stuff.
all
Yeah.
said and done, it's the same problem, but I do
Hmm.
have to tweak it a little bit depending on how sensitive I'm finding they are about their stuff or how proud they are about their organizational stuff.
Right. Yeah. Well, then we dive into the solution. So at Christian Ministry Alliance, we help them sort through the clutter and provide practical solutions so leaders can gain back their time and have energy to lead their people and mission effectively. Now
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
feel like it's a really strong outcome there.
It's a super strong outcome. And what I have found is that early part here where it talks about getting back your time, that's been a ringer.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, see, then it's almost like how it affected us, Matt, is that when we present it that way, you know, and I'll say, so you can gain back your time. I personalize even more. I'm talking to somebody, right? So you can
Hmm.
get back your time, right? And have the energy to lead. It's like this shot of oxygen into their bloodstream. Just the thought and the dreaming of that. Um, which is why when you said before, it's how do they feel about your solution? That's why it hits so hard for me is because when we can tell that you get back your time, you have energy again to lead,
Yeah.
where God's called you to lead, then it's a ringer. So
Yeah. I love that.
yeah,
Yeah. And if you look at, so if you go to, Christian Ministry Alliance's website, you're going to see kind of a version of that on your header and things like that. Cause it's like, this is the main problem we're helping people overcome.
yeah, and we do that we tweak it within every service line. It's the same issue, but it's just phrased within that service environment.
Yeah,
So
for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Well, let's dive into some church examples. So, this is a version of, the church plant I was part of was called Bridge Church. And so it's a little bit different, but this is similar to what they're trying to communicate. So, church is often a hard place for skeptics, right? So that's a strong problem. It's like, hey, someone's just skeptical. They have questions about faith, things like that. At Bridge Church, we make it safe for people to express their questions and doubts so anyone can discover Jesus at their own pace without fear of judgment. So that's and that was really the heart of Bridge Church, that it would be a place for anyone to come who, yeah, really struggled with fitting in and having questions and be able to wrestle through tough things.
Yeah.
So that made it so if you think if like you're a church planner and you're someone, tell me about your church, or tell me, what you do. It's like, well, like I'm part of a church plant, but we're trying to create something that's easy for skeptics to be a part of. And suddenly there's a like someone slows down a little bit and they don't just give you a snap judgment because you created a hook. You're like, and they're like, well, tell me about that. Well, we try and make it safe for them to express their questions and doubts so anyone can discover Jesus at their own pace. So it's really important to be able to like lead with something where someone then, they want to get their questions answered and understand more
Yeah.
about what you're creating. So let's go to example 4. So I actually got this from another StoryBrand guide. So I'm not even sure where Cottonwood is, and but this is an actual church. So
Okay.
yeah, life doesn't come with instructions. At Cottonwood, we help you discover the person God has always wanted you to be so you can live a fulfilling, God-directed life. So this one is a little bit more kind of like spiritual in nature and kind of
Right.
how they wrote it. So it's like less like the other one was about like I have questions and doubts, where this one kind of is more like, you
Yeah.
know, like it's spiritual. So but yeah, this is a super strong like hook. When someone's like, well, tell me about your church, it's like, well, life doesn't really come with instructions. Well, this is what we do, how we help you out.
Yeah, and what I like about the story brand process in your examples is it's not even every church has a different culture that
Hmm.
they need to put out there, and they're dealing with different problems in their particular community. They know their people, they know their environment, they know the kind of people who come around, and so they can fashion this and creating something that's simple to remember that everybody can say is I like the fact that it's churches, but they're always different,
Yeah.
because this is a completely different flavor than the bridge church you just had.
Yeah, totally. And I would say, so that's a really good point that you brought up, because I think it's important, it's super important that the problem you're solving is probably the main thing that your church is known for. So, Bridge Church might be known as a place where skeptics can come and figure things out, whereas your church might be known for strong biblical teaching. And so
Right.
your
Right.
your problem might be around the fact that a lot of people have a hard time finding a church that uh, has strong biblical teaching and is engaging at the same time. And so maybe that's your problem hook. Whereas another church, maybe the thing that you're known for is you have a really awesome kids ministry. And so maybe your problem has something to do with a lot of parents have a hard time finding a church their kids love going
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the problem. So I would say like your problem statement should be really kind of anchored on what your church is known for and what you're really excellent at. And this is
That's good.
the main thing that you help people overcome.
That's
So
good. That's
and
good.
yeah, and I think along with that, like what's really important to know, and I'm going to say it, like reiterate this later, that you can't say it all at once. So that's the problem is like a pastor would be like, well, we're good at so many things. It's like, well, of course you are, but what is the one thing that could help begin a conversation? Because in the conversation you talk about so many other things, but what's the one thing that would it's an elevator pitch. So it's like you're just trying to get your foot in the door for a longer conversation. So you can't say it all here. This is a simplified, very simplified message to get the conversation going.
That's great. That's a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah. So let's transition. So this is a church. This is actually a real church too. They have a very specific target audience. So
It looks like that.
yeah. So when you work at Disney World, you spend your time serving others, but have no one to serve you. So this is a church for Disney cast members. So here at the gathering, we help cast members navigate the complexities of work, finances, relationships, and faith so you can find true happiness. Yeah.
It is, it is
Yeah.
so specific. I mean, that's the thing, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's they're not just any church, they're very specific type of church.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm hope people who are watching are getting the understanding by now that you you can be specific and be general enough where you don't feel like you have to cram everything in there. So you
Hmm.
can be targeted. Maybe that's the right word. Maybe you can be targeted in your approach and it'd be completely natural. It just takes a little bit of work to get there. So,
Yeah. Well, that's the hard part is deleting and simplifying. So I would say like as you're kind of brainstorming this, like dump it all, be really messy. But then round two, three, four, five,
yeah,
eventually you're gonna be able to start tightening it up and make sure you're not redundant and really simplify your words. That's the hard part. So example 6, let's go to a nonprofit. So this is a nonprofit, a real nonprofit. So it takes funding for organizations to help women impacted by sexual violence, but it's just the starting point. Solution: the Jensen Project's holistic approach empowers nonprofits with grants, resources, and ongoing support to fuel the fight against sexual violence. So it's pretty powerful, and especially like these guys, Jensen Project, they probably are relying on a lot of donors and people to help them be successful, and so they want to be able to communicate, pretty quickly their entire message in just a few lines. And so, of course, there's a lot more to it, but you want to begin the conversation. But yeah, this is a pretty powerful elevator pitch for them.
that's great.
Cool. Well, let's keep going. So I want to just give a couple tips for people giving their elevator pitch. So tip number one, this is the hard part: simplify, simplify, simplify. So your first few versions are going to be really bad. Rework it a few times to simplify it as much as possible. I find so thesaurus.com, as you're starting to like try and figure out like how can we say this, find someone who's good at English, who has an English major or whatever, like run it through a couple people. But then also part of the simplification process is just saying it out loud a bunch. It's like, does it read well? Does it flow? Does it have a cadence to it? Um, but simplify as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, I think that's the work, right? And I think you're important because you said the cadence. I never like thought about it, but that's really important in
Mhm.
terms of because you won't say it if there's not that cadence to what you're saying, and it's clean and it's crisp and it's direct and it's simple. You will stop saying it, and you're going to waste all your time and not ever use it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, so that'll go into some of these others. So practice it. So practice it by yourself many times until it starts to feel natural. I find that in everyday conversation, like just maybe even get used to just saying the problem first. So it's like if you're like, I don't know if I can like say the whole thing because it feels pitchy. Well, if you don't want it to feel like a pitch, then just kind of have fun saying your problem to people. And you're like, small businesses have really bad websites. Ha 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 ha. You both connect over
That's
something.
right.
So I think just lead with say, how like small church pastors like can really struggle with kind of their back office stuff. Like, yeah, well, that's what we help with. Here's how we
Right.
help. So I think just kind of keep it in a very
That's good.
natural. You want it to feel natural.
And the other point, and I know that we're on tip two, but it's in you gave permission, and this is really important. And I think leaders fall into this. They don't give themselves permission to have a really bad first draft,
Yeah.
right? Well, allow yourself to have a really bad first draft. Think about if so. I talked to a pastor the other day. We were talking about something like this, and I said, "Remember the first message you ever preached?"
Yes.
He's like, "Oh my gosh, that was." Well, but you practice now, right? So this is your first run at this kind of stuff for leaders, for pastors or ministry leaders who are outside the church or just nonprofit leaders. This is the first run at this. And so to give yourself the permission to say, get it out first. It's not going to look good. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to sound great, but get it out because that's your starting point. You can always build from there, right? So you have
Yeah.
permission for it to be bad. It's okay.
Yeah. You bounce it
Yeah,
off your wife or best friend or something
that's
like that, and they can laugh at you, and
right.
then
In a safe space, let them make fun of you. It's
yeah.
okay.
Next one, don't chicken out. So it will be hard at first to not answer the question, so what do you do with your job title? So force yourself to always begin with the problem language until it feels natural. So I think like the path of least resistance, because you're like, I don't know, I don't want it to sound weird or awkward, is for you to say, well, I'm a pastor. And then people like walk away and you're like, what in the world? But um, I would say that like you need to just overcome those limiting thoughts in your head and things like that, because like if you do believe in your cause and you believe that the problems that you're overcoming, especially in the church world are, it's huge, like they're monumental, you believe that you have a message that could change your life, then lead with something that is going to possibly open up a door for conversation.
Yeah.
Versus, yeah, if you just say I'm a pastor, you don't know where they're at, you don't know what they're coming in with, the baggage they might have, and so at
Yeah.
least leaving with
Especially, yeah.
yeah.
Especially if you're a pastor, because people are engaged or they'll shut down.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So at least with the thing that you're the problem that you're overcoming, you have the opportunity for them to identify with that problem as well. So you're like, man, like, you know, especially the thing with like, let's say kids ministry. So a lot of, how a lot of parents have a hard time finding a church their kids love. That's how many parents? That's like probably almost every parent that that's probably every, like, whatever. Like there's, I mean,
Yeah.
there are churches that have great kids programs, but like still, most people haven't experienced that. And so just you leading with that suddenly gives someone a category to think about that isn't like in your face, like, do you know Jesus? Well, that's gonna scare someone. But if you lead with,
Right.
man, like, shouldn't church be fun for kids? Then suddenly you have
Yeah.
your foot in the door. So yeah, don't chicken out. There's the message is too important for you to chicken out.
Yeah. Because you are, and I'm going to tell people on the front end, look, when I first started using ours, boy, the chicken out, that's a strong pull.
Yeah,
So force yourself not to do so, and it gets easier. I promise you.
yeah, it does. And then if when you feel more natural about it, then you can have more fun too. So you just kind
That's
of,
true. That's true.
just smile, laugh, because the problem in some ways, could be big and monumental, but also could kind of be lighthearted in how you present it. So
True.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tip number 4, get everyone in your organization using it. So when everyone is saying the same thing, it creates focus and builds energy. Like I could see, like, let's say there is a church that really, they have incredible, um, like environments for people to connect. Like they have great small groups. And so, like if, let's say your entire church, like people like in the 101 class that they take, that it's like, hey, like this is the message that we would love for you to say to anyone who asks about the church that you go to. That you just get everyone, like, we would love for you to say this, that, like, how a lot of people have a hard time finding friends at the church that they go to. Well, our church provides an awesome place for people to connect,
Absolutely.
so that they have, you know, um, someone to go to when life is hard, so that they have, friends to grow old with. I don't know. I just like, but it's like if you had everyone after a 101 class kind of adopting this, like, hey, when someone asks about our church, here's what we would love for you to say. man, that could create some real like energy, in your church, which would be really cool.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. That's a good point. Even outside of the church, you're talking about the nonprofit sector.
Yeah.
Uh, to get your donors who really love you to be able to say the same thing that you would say to somebody in an introduction to your organization, man, that's a win-win in a big way. Because if you can get them
Hmm.
to do that, they're on board. They're 100% there with you,
Yeah, and
and
if
they
you think
influence their friends. So
if you don't have like a message that frames your organization, then you have everyone, all the key stakeholders are saying slightly different things.
that's right.
And so then it's hard to always, I mean, it's hard to get the momentum that you really want to get in your organization.
Yeah, that's good.
Um, Number five, print it on other pieces of communication. So I said, put it in the footer of your website, in an email signature, put it on a business card, wherever it may be, that it's just kind of the summary statement, these 3 lines, the summary of what you're about and everything that you do. So you may have an email, long letter that you send to a bunch of donors, but in your like signature at the bottom, you just have an italicized kind of smaller print is just like this quick summary of what your ministry and organization is about. And so I think
So
it's
you
just
put it.
help.
You're saying put it everywhere. Don't just wait for it in person. Get
Hmm.
that whatever succinct statement is
Hmm.
that you can even take your problem and your solution and all that kind of stuff. When you crunch that down to a succinct statement, plaster that across everything you do. So it's
Yeah.
always on the front of the lobe, right?
Yeah, because so marketing, and I know it's weird to think of marketing in church world, but nonprofit is not quite as weird because you do like you're trying to get people on board with what you're doing. But marketing is an exercise in memorization. And so it's like if someone can over and over and over see like what you're about, then it's going to help them respond quicker and easier the next time they're called to some sort of action because they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I know what they're about. I read it or anything. I like, oh, isn't that the church that's about being a safe place for anyone? Oh yeah, like that's that church. But it's because they've seen it, marketing, it talks about like for someone to respond to a call to action, they have to see a message 7 times at least. So it's like, well, if they see, a message over and over and over, then when they are called to respond, it's easier for them to connect the dots and be like, oh, I know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
So that's my last tip. I think the last thing I would say is I know people are going to be watching this video. I would love for people to just email me the one-liner they created. So
It's
email me,
great.
matt@bigbigstory.com, and I would love to be like, hey, you're on the right track, or just give
Yes.
a pointer or two. So feel free to reach out to me and just say, hey, I watched this video, and whoever your listeners are, I'd love to give them some feedback on their one-liner.
And I want to say to those who are watching this, it's going to be the part of the things you're not going to want to do is email Matt. Uh, just take the risk. Just get out there and take the risk. Work on the forum. Create your one-liner that you believe in, um, and send it to him because he will ask questions. Matt, I know you don't want to plug your own horn, but I will, or blow your own horn. We're not going to plug it. We're going to blow it. So he will ask you clarifying questions that you've never thought about to help think through the wording that you're not sure about. There's things that Matt brings to the table that for the normal person running a ministry or a small nonprofit or a church or whatever the case you're running, it's not in your wheelhouse, right? So we always tell people do the things that you're really good at doing and let others do the things that they're good at doing as part of your organization. So let Matt help you in this way. Don't call me because I'm not the guy. Um, Matt's the guy. That's why I called Matt. It's because I don't know what I'm doing. So, but Matt can help you and take the risk, make the email, send the email, let him um, speak into it because you're going to be all the better off if you do. So there's my little pitch for you, Matt.
Yeah, I love that. And I enjoy meeting new people. So regardless, like I think that's a win is just be able to like hear about unique stories and
Yeah.
situations and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully people see it as an opportunity to connect.
That's true because man, I was talking before it gone on with you this morning. Um, I was talking with another leader in a small organization, and I'm not going to go into it because I don't want to talk about him on this video, but he was telling me about what he does, and it was so completely foreign to me. Once he explained it, he had more energy and passion than for anything. But I just I didn't even know that was a thing. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I can imagine you come along and cross things that you're like, that is so interesting. 'Cause I never even thought about that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
other people are living with it, and it's something that. But if you're right, so all of this to say, as deep as your passion is, as a leader of your organization, you owe it to yourself and to your organization and to your donors and to your people to be able to create a statement that clarifies what you do to build momentum in your organization. And this is it's a way to do it.
yeah. I
So,
love it. Well said, Doug.
hey, thanks, man.
Yeah,
Maybe no, I'm not gonna do it. I am not. You're the guy. You're the marketing guy. I do operations. So,
yeah.
um, all right. So, Matt, hey, thanks, man, so much for being with us. Folks, I hope you enjoyed it and got information out of it. Of course, we're going to have the slide deck in the comments below. So please click on it, download it, and you can go through it in your own pace. We're going to provide that for you below in the comment section of this video. So it's not going to go away. So feel free to do that. And remember, email Matt with your questions. And if you have anything else to talk about or discuss, feel free to email us as well, and we'll get your information to Matt if we need to do it that way. So, all right, that's awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate your time.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you so much to Matt and his time with us today. We just want to say thank you to you as well for joining us. We appreciate your time. We know there's a lot of stuff you can be doing today, and you've decided to join us instead. So thank you for that. On your screen before you, as you can see, we have 4 major areas that we provide our services through: Alliance Consulting, Alliance Digital, Alliance Finance, and Alliance Learning. Please, please, please reach out if you are in need of any help at all. If we can't help you, we'll direct you in the right path. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you through the next Alliance Learning event.